Welcome to Enterprise Technology Spotlight from InfoSystems, where we help organizations learn how to better evaluate different technology solutions, whether they have knowledge of the system beforehand or not. My name is Keith Hales. I'm the host of this podcast, and joining us today is Fred Cobb.
Hello, Keith.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm
All
doing
right.
good. And so today, what I wanted to do was talk a little bit more about an area of expertise for you, which is security and helping organizations run efficiently and effectively from a technology perspective.
Certainly.
Yeah, so I think this is going to be good because the last time we got together, we introduced this idea of SOC 2 compliance, and you began to give an explanation, and it pretty quickly became apparent we might need to spend a little bit more time on that than we had in the previous podcast. So for those organizations that are out there that haven't heard of SOC 2, or maybe they've heard of it, but they really don't understand it, why would that matter if they're considering a vendor, if they're considering an outside business partner, like a technology provider, or really other providers as well? Why does SOC 2 matter, and what are some of the key principles they need to look for there?
Yeah, so SOC 2, in the last episode, we talked about SOC 2. It stands for Service Organization Controls, and it is really that third-party evaluation of an organization's processes around security, data integrity. It's really designed for if a third party, an MSP provider, if they're holding data, say in a cloud environment, or they have access to data that is still on premise, how are they protecting that data? You know, we read these horror stories almost every day where somebody's getting breached. There has been a data leak somewhere. And if you think about it, an MSP, a managed service provider, is a really nice target in some respects because that MSP may have access into a lot of different networks. So it's paramount that MSPs really have tight security. And some MSPs do it quite well. Some MSPs, they don't even really think about the type of controls they're putting into place or the type of security that they're putting into place. So really what SOC 2 does, it provides some assurance. Let's say you're running a business, you're thinking about a managed service provider solution to come in and do your IT for you. You want to know, are they doing the right things internally? Are they doing the right things within their systems that are going to be connected to your systems to provide services to you? And the fact that SOC 2 attestation exists shows that they've taken it serious. They've gone through a very lengthy process for a third-party company to come in and evaluate what they're doing. Again, with things, a lot of things around security, a lot of controls specific to just straight information security. A lot of things around process integrity. Lots of policies and procedures are reviewed during a SOC 2 assessment to make sure that not only is the company doing things, they're documenting those things so that there's this body of knowledge that can be shared as people come in to the organization, as people have to adopt different things, as processes are changing internally. So it's a quite extensive documentation review. Around privacy is another area within a SOC 2. If you think about all the things that are happening around privacy laws these days, obviously HIPAA has been around for quite some time about protecting electronic protected health information, your medical records. Okay, so there's some very stringent privacy controls around that. You have states now, California, Texas, New York, they're all enacting separate privacy requirements for protecting the private data of their citizens. We've got the European Union, GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. So it's all about securing that data. And what SOC 2 helps to prove to a customer that's thinking about buying the services of an MSP is that a lot of the right things are in place in order for them to achieve that level of compliance.
So you mentioned MSP, and I think this matters because as technology has grown and as technology has evolved, there's, I call it the traditional managed service provider, the desktop, the email, that type of thing. But there's also security-focused MSP services as well. You can provide outsourced IT security services, whether that be for different types of monitoring software, things that might be on the system. So would it be fair to say if an outside provider has access to your network or is doing technology-related work for you, that you really want to ask them if they're SOC 2 compliant? Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, I think so. And you may get a variety of answers. Once again, if you got an MSP that says, hey, what's SOC 2? That should be a red flag. You may get the answer, we're looking into that, but we haven't quite haven't bitten off on that as far as taking it on, because even though it is achievable. It does take some time, and it does take some expense on the part of the service provider to do it. So some MSPs simply aren't in a position right now to go through that process and to spend the necessary money to achieve that certification. But try to find out, are they working towards it? Have they heard of it? Oh, yeah, they've been SOC 2 compliant for 10 years. If so, can you prove to me you're SOC 2 compliant? Can you provide me your attestation letter each time a SOC 2 is awarded? And once you're in that process, you're doing it on an annual basis. It's good for 12 months, and you redo it. Good for 12 months, and you redo it. So each time you're revalidated, you get an attestation of compliance, basically, that's equivalent to, say, a certification document that says, hey, I'm certified. It's not called that in SOC 2 world. It's called attestation letter. They should be able to produce that on demand and provide you with that.
Okay. Yeah. So SOC 2 is security related, but it's also operational maturity related. It's controls related. It's documentation. It's all these different areas. And so it does give that nice stamp. And now, every system and every process, nothing's perfect, right? So everything has its limitations, but certainly it's a good standard, especially if you're a large organization, if you're dealing with private information, if you're a publicly traded company, things of that nature. It almost becomes a de facto, kind of, hey, our default position of, hey, we need this, right? Kind of prove to me that we don't need it if we're going to partner with somebody. Is that fair?
Yeah, a lot of people in the industry understand that any type of certification like that is a point in time. In other words, I used to conduct PCI audits as a qualified security assessor, and I would go out and we would spend months, on big accounts doing the PCI assessment, finally writing the report on compliance. We could hand that report of compliance to that customer. We could leave. They could make a process change or technology change with their environment. Guess what? They're no longer PCI compliant. So one of the things I like about SOC 2 is there's so many things that they validate you against that are ongoing. In other words, they want to see samples of your change management processes throughout the year. They want to see samples of your risk management meetings that you're having throughout the year. They want to see samples of issues that have come up internally, whether they're security incidents, whether they're outages, and how you dealt with them and how you have recorded those things. So it's not one of those things where they come in and say, oh, yeah, that control looks good today. I like that screenshot. Check. They're saying that control looks good, but I want to see evidence of the last 10 times that's happened, or the last weekly, say the last 6 weekly meetings you've had around risk management. So again, very stringent. That's one of the things I like about SOC 2.
Okay. So continue on that path. Any outside provider, I think we can agree, needs to be taking those steps, because the SOC 2 is the compliance component and it's also the certification component. But there are practical steps that organizations should be taking that kind of are the I'll say the implementation of some of those things from a security and a process perspective. And some of the ones that we've implemented here to ensure the security of our own environment, of our clients' environments. I just want to talk through a few of those. The first one being MFA, multi-factor authentication. So can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, so multi-factor, and if you've been in the industry any time whatsoever, you probably have heard of multi-factor. You've heard the term two-factor in some cases. Basically something you have, something you know, and it really exponentially creates a secondary security barrier between you and the bad guys. If you're just simply relying on a username, password, time and time again, it's been proven that usernames and passwords can be lost, they can be stolen, they can be compromised if databases are compromised out in the wild that has your information in it. So having that something you have, in other words, that cell phone that's going to ring you back and you authorize that connection, or that soft token or that hard token that's going to have a spinning number that changes every 60 seconds that you have to put into a system, that gives that secondary validation that you are who you say you are. And MSPs should have multi-factor authentication for their internal processes. They should have multi-factor authentication for any applications that are used to connect to customers' environments. It gives that extra layer of security.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that is critical because we deal with a lot of passwords. I mean, the reality of the world today is that everybody has tons of passwords, and you're right, they can be hacked or stolen, it's not best practice, but people do it every day where they use the same password for multiple logins, or they just kind of cycle through the same 4 or 5 or 6 passwords over and over again. And so that MFA adds that extra layer of security.
Certainly does.
We'll be back with the Enterprise Tech Spotlight podcast after we pause for this special message. Have your IT projects created stress on your team over the last few years? More than half of IT professionals say they are burned out at work. IT departments are under constant pressure to keep systems running while completing IT projects on time and under budget. And they often report that they're understaffed and underfunded. InfoSystems is now offering free IT project review sessions. Kick off your 2020 IT projects the right way. If you're planning or considering some type of IT project, software, networks, servers, storage, phones, and want to get an unbiased and accurate understanding of the skills, time, and cost required to make it happen, this is the perfect first step to take. Our expert project team will help make sure you don't miss important details, waste money, or overestimate your capabilities. Visit the InfoSystems website at www.infosystems.biz to request your IT project review. Now back to the podcast.
So something else that we've implemented as well, and it's SIM technology. Now, I have to admit, a few years ago, I had heard of SIM technology, but I was certainly not up to speed on exactly what it means and why an MSP would even want to consider SIM technology. So can you speak to that a little bit?
I sure can. So SIM, security incident events management, it's a way to look at what's happening on the network that may be nefarious in nature. In other words, with a typical SIM, you're going to look for emerging threats. There are threat feeds that you can connect your SIM technology to. And when you think SIM, there's some big players in the game. IBM's QRadar solution is one. Alien Vault, now owned by AT&T, is another. And Logarithm, and the list goes on and on and on. Essentially, they're doing the same thing. They are ingesting logs. They're looking for, in some cases, they use behavioral analysis to see what might be happening that wasn't happening yesterday. Maybe a large amount of data was transferred out. This particular password was tried over and over again. There is this type of payload setting on this specific server that may be malware. So SIMs are constantly probing. They're looking for things in real time. I firmly believe that you need some sort of SIM technology as an MSP that you can provide to your customers. And even if you're out there not using an MSP for services, you need to have some sort of SIM technology on the wire looking for things that might be happening in your environment.
Now, in some cases, it's almost a requirement in some industries to meet some compliance requirements. Is that correct?
Yes. If you look at, well, again, PCI is an example. For if you take the larger customers, if you're doing more than 6 million credit card transactions in a year, your Home Depots, which had a major breach, by the way, if you recall, a few years ago, and your Targets, all of those, they are required in order to achieve PCI compliance that they have some sort of continuous daily monitoring of log files and events on the network. You imagine the system sprawl in an environment like that, hundreds if not thousands of servers. How does a human look at all that information on a daily basis and ascertain out of the log files if they got a problem or not? You can't. You have to employ a SIM technology that can comb through a mountain of data, at the speed of a computer and provide you information as far as what might be happening that's not necessarily good.
Yeah. So the SIM technology, as we've discussed, will watch for things in the network. So as a provider to outside companies, we really want to be aware very quickly and stop it very quickly if there's anything that looks out of the ordinary inside of our network because of the risk it could pose to other organizations as well.
Absolutely.
So that kind of leads me back to antivirus, right? And look, antivirus has been a term and that type of technology has been around for now decades, which is basically forever in the technology world. But antivirus is beginning to change, or some providers are beginning to emerge that are a little different from an antivirus in the way that they approach the problem of viruses. So do you want to talk about that?
Certainly I can. Again, to your point, antivirus has been around for a long time. We used to, jokingly accuse the antivirus software vendors that, hey, they're creating these viruses so they can sell, obviously not a true thing, but it's kind of a running joke. But if you think about the concept of how traditional antivirus works, I have to get something bad on my system before the antivirus software can detect it. Oh, I've got something bad. Hey, guess what? You got something bad. So then let's go off and quarantine that. Wouldn't it be nice if you stop something bad from getting on the system before it gets on the system? So with some of the advanced threat detection, some of the intrusion preventions type systems that you can get, some of the more next-gen type antivirus, I'll pick on Cylance for a moment. They don't run in the traditional sense of an antivirus that we've been accustomed to for years and years. They use more of an AI, more of a machine learning type approach, where they have the heuristics of the viruses, not necessarily stored in a virus update on the system, but more a lot of that information is cloud-based. So they're taking a more proactive approach in identifying the viruses that are in the wild, have the potential to get on your system. So there's a lot of progress being made. It's really kind of morphing into from an antivirus talk to an endpoint detection and response talk, an EDR type, or MDR, managed detection response.
Okay. So a theme that has come up over and over again, whether it's SOC 2 and all the proactive work to do around SOC 2 to get that compliance and to have the certification and the ongoing work you have to do to I'll say stay in good standing. And then with multi-factor authentication, again, it's keeping the bad guys out, right? And with SIM, it's an immediate alert, right? Not letting a problem fester inside of the network. And even with the advanced antivirus systems, the theme continues to be, let's stop it before it becomes a problem, right? And I think, for any organization, whether, if somebody's just looking at their own organization, obviously that's the approach that they should be taking to technology issues and security related issues. But especially if an organization is out there and they're evaluating outside provider, I think making sure that those providers are also being proactive, that they're also being proactive and trying to get the certifications and putting the solutions in place that are going to keep there from being a problem. Yeah, there's always going to be a need, unfortunately. I think there's always going to be a need for remediation work, for cleanup after the fact, because the bad guys are always trying to find a way in and the good guys are always trying to keep them out. And so every now and then something's going to happen. But, think about it like at home. You lock your doors, right? I mean, you want to keep the bad guys out. And so taking a step to keep the bad guys out and to be proactive, I think is critical when evaluating an outside provider. I mean, would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, the SOC 2 speaks to a lot of that particular MSP doing a lot of those things that we're talking about right now. But I would continue, questioning that MSP. Tell me a little bit more about what you're doing internally for your antivirus. Tell me a little bit more about what you're doing for your SIM offerings. Are you running it internally? Are you offering the same type of service to external customers that you're supporting internally? So again, having the certification, having the attestation letter is great, but I would still probe that MSP and ask them, maybe get down to specifics. Just what are you using for a SIM? Just what are you using for an antivirus solution? Other things that the SOC 2 gets into is looking at the people inside the environment. In other words, you want to trust the folks that are logging into your systems. A lot of cases are coming in with administrative privileges because they have to have that privilege escalation to be able to do certain things. So you want to make sure that the company that's hired them, that you subsequently hired to provide services to you, are they doing the background checks on these individuals? Are they training these individuals? Are they staying up to date? So ask those probing questions as well when you're selecting an MSP.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it's that due diligence that anybody wants to do on their own environment that they would expect. I would fully expect. I mean, I think something that would be something if you take nothing else out of this conversation, whenever the service provider comes to you with their sales pitch, if you have some confidence in questioning them and throwing back out at them, and then maybe for the annual yearly update meeting where they come back around and talk about, hey, what's new, what's changed, what's going on different in the customer environment. I think it's very appropriate for a customer to turn that back on them, say, okay, now that I've answered your questions, let me ask you what you've done to update your technology. And if they don't have a good answer, then that could be a cause for pause in the environment. And
Absolutely.
the relationship. So,
absolutely. If I could add one more thing there
Absolutely.
around that. Remember, SOC 2 is protecting data in the cloud. So one of the things I might ask, just kind of, adding on to my layer of questioning around a prospective MSP is, okay, so can you support me on premise? I have to have my systems on premise. What can you do to securely support me if my systems have to stay on, within my data center or on the shop floor? Also, well, I'm thinking about moving to the cloud. Does SOC 2 apply to the cloud? In other words, could an MSP support me in Azure? Could an MSP support me in AWS? Possibly, does that MSP have a private cloud I can move my workload into? And does the SOC 2 validation that you have cover operations within those different frameworks? Mm-hmm. So that's a very important question to ask to find out just how deep the MSP goes in providing services in different areas, whether it's cloud-based, on-prem, or some hybrid of.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, right? So if they say, yes, I have the certification, but it only applies to the internal bookkeeping, that probably is not the same as somebody who says, yes, and I can attest that the certification reaches out to all of our different offerings. That's certainly be a big differentiator between the different offerings there.
Absolutely.
So, Brett, thank you for joining us today, and appreciate all the insight, and hopefully our folks listening and watching have learned something of use as you're evaluating outside partners and providers. Next time we're going to have someone, Tony Owens, who is a friend of ours at Arrow, who we work with on the IBM front, come and talk to us about some of the updates that are coming from IBM and some of their announcements, and also hopefully we're going to talk a little bit about some other new things on the horizon, like AI and how that can be actually used inside of customer environments as well. So Thank you for joining us, and look forward to you joining us next time.